Hey gang, it's Squill, and at this year's Cartoon Network Fantasy panel, we got the reveal of the two most recent Adventure Time spin-offs, those being Side Quest and Heyo Bimo, alongside the Adventure Time movie. I made a first impressions video going over this news, but like with the movie, I have more to say here, particularly in regards to side quests. I don't really have more to say about Heyo Bimo. It's a preschool show, so I'm not really expecting much out of it. I'm sure it'll be cute and fun and have wonderful art direction. It's side quests that has me worried. The Variety article that details the news describes side quests as a kids series that will take audiences back to when Finn was just a kid who dreamed of epic quests and monster fights with his best friend, Jake the dog. At first, I thought this meant that Side Quest would be a prequel series about Finn and Jake prior to Season 1, an idea I could definitely get behind. I always wondered what Finn's first few adventures were like, his first interactions with PB and Ice King, and Jake's time in a gang. It probably wouldn't have been my first choice for a spin-off, but it's an idea that certainly has potential. However, the more information I received about the idea, the more skeptical I became. The article goes on to state that Nate Cash is attached to the series, with no mention of Adam Muto or anyone else. For those who may not know, Adam Muto has been the showrunner for Adventure Time since Season 5. He has been working on the show since the very beginning. Adventure Time would not be what it is without him. Side Quest will be the first project since mid-Season 5 that Muto isn't showrunning, which is a little worrying to me. I know the guy is spread pretty thin at the moment, with Fiona and Cake Season 2, the movie, and Heyo Bimo, but his lack of involvement here is definitely worrying. And Nate Cash being the only name attached to the project isn't helping. Cash was a storyboard supervisor on Seasons 3 and 4 of Adventure Time, promoted to supervising director in Season 5, but left the show afterwards. I have nothing against the guy, I'm sure he added a lot to the series, but he hasn't worked on Adventure Time in almost a decade. His name being the only one attached to the spin-off is certainly concerning. But while this had me worried, it's the next piece of information I found that really concerns me. According to Twitter user Midomer, who was present at Cartoon Network's Fantasy panel, the spin-off takes us to Season 1, Season 2 of the original series. Now, I've seen people disagree over what the statement is supposed to mean, and I'll admit it's worded weird. I've heard some say that this means it'll lead into Season 1 as a prequel, however, it's the mention of Season 2 that gets me here. I mean, if this were to take place before Season 1, then obviously it'll take place before Season 2 by default, right? So why mention Season 2 at all? The only reason why you'd need to do so is if the series was set at around the time of Seasons 1 and 2, and that this was a Lost Adventures type show. And hell, the name Side Quests even implies that these are Finn and Jake stories that we never saw. And if this truly is a mid-quel spin-off, then I straight up think this is a bad idea, and here's why. Adventure Time is one of the most unique TV shows ever made. While many long-running shows tend to stagnate as they get older, trying desperately to recapture the magic of what made the show work in its golden age, Adventure Time is one of the very few to evolve as it goes along. We'll get stories centered around secondary and supporting characters, mini-series, character arcs that span across multiple seasons. The show was never comfortable remaining exactly the same from start to finish. This inevitably led to some people being alienated by the later seasons, but I'd much rather that than the show become a shell of its former self. And the part of what makes those early seasons so fun to go back to is the fact that the show wasn't like that forever. It evolved and matured since then, so when going back to Seasons 1 and 2, they capture a more simple version of Adventure Time. They're almost like a time capsule in a way, a time in which the series was solely focused on the wacky adventures of Finn and Jake. As enjoyable as Seasons 1 and 2 are, it's a good thing that the show wasn't like that forever. So going back to try and recapture that feel of the early seasons feels as if the show is de-evolving in a way. Like we're hitting a reset button on everything the show has built up for almost 15 years. I mean, thankfully, we still have Fiona and Cake Season 2 in the movie, projects that will take place after the original series, so it's not a permanent reset, but still. And alongside my issues with the show's premise, I also have to wonder if the show is even capable of recapturing the tone of the early seasons. I don't know, seasons 1 and 2 feel so entwined with that early 2010s internet culture. It was such a tonally different show back then. Like, imagine The Simpsons trying to recapture the tone of its first season in 2024. I can't even begin to picture what that would look like. And even if they did somehow find that tone, I still don't think they can quite capture what made those seasons work. Going back to that Variety article, the second paragraph about side quests reads, "Rather than featuring a lore-heavy narrative spread across episodes and seasons as Adventure Time and Fiona and Cake did, side quests will deliver standalone episodes starring early versions of fan-favorite characters, including the sometimes villain, the Ice King." I feel as though a lot of people flanderize seasons 1 and 2 as being purely episodic, and that the show eventually became entirely serialized. This isn't really true. Seasons 1 and 2, while more lighthearted in tone, still do an excellent job introducing us to the characters and world of Adventure Time, planting seeds for later character arcs down the road. And while the show did become more serialized, there are still plenty of fun one-off episodes in the later seasons. But based on this quote, it sounds like the series will be purely episodic Finn and Jake adventures with little to no impact on the wider scope of the series. And this makes sense because if it takes place around the time of seasons 1 and 2, then it wouldn't make sense for anything truly meaningful to happen without it being referenced at a later point in the series. But at that point, what does this add to Adventure Time? Why are these stories worth telling? It feels like content that's made just for the sake of there being more Adventure Time content. Made to appeal to the crowd who thinks the show got too serious in its later years, as opposed to the hardcore fans. But then again, what if this isn't even canon to begin with? I know Middlemer said that it is canon, but a part of me wonders if this is Cartoon Network's attempt to reboot Adventure Time. I mean, think about it. A more episodic series starring younger versions of Finn and Jake? That sounds a little rebooty to me. Similar to something like Teen Titans Go or the Powerpuff Girls reboot. Or hell, even We Baby Bears if you want a more recent example. Actually, We Baby Bears might be the closest comparison we have to side quests. That's a show that was never officially called a reboot. It was always referred to as a spin-off of We Bare Bears, starring the Bears as Cubs. The original show had plenty of episodes featuring the Bears as Cubs, so the spin-off makes sense on paper. But from what I've seen of it, the show is basically an entirely different entity when compared to the main show. While We Bare Bears was a fairly grounded slice-of-life show, We Baby Bears contains far more fantasy elements and is generally more anime-inspired. This isn't to say anything about the quality of the show, I've barely seen it, so I can't really judge myself. But I think it is fair to say that this isn't what most We Bare Bears fans would have wanted out of a spin-off. It's a We Bare Bears in name only, and I think side quests might be in a similar boat. A more marketable and comedic version of Adventure Time. This could explain why Adam Muto isn't involved. Maybe it's supposed to be a fresh take on the series. Heck, according to Middlemer, it might even have a different art style, taking on a blend of 2D and 3D. And if this is a Lost Seasons 1 and 2 Adventures type show, then that prevents the show from using any character introduced after Season 2, such as Flame Princess, Huntress Wizard, and Lemongrab. If this is the case, then it definitely worries me that we're getting this now. An Adventure Time reboot is something that always felt like a concerning possibility, but getting one now, as canon Adventure Time material is currently being made, is a worrying sign for the future of this franchise. What if Cartoon Network doubles down on this more simplified version of the characters? What if Reboot Finn and Jake begin to eclipse the branding of Adventure Time the same way that the Powerpuff Girls reboot did, forever tainting the reputation of the franchise? Even if this isn't a reboot, I do think that just going back to Season 1 Finn and Jake at all is a worrying sign for the future of this franchise. I don't mean to be a doomer here, but it's a concern that I can't help but bring up. I genuinely don't want to make anyone feel lesser for being excited for this show. If you're looking forward to this, then that's wonderful. I would never want to take that away from you. But based on the information we have, I have a feeling that side quests is a bad idea and a troubling indicator for the future of this franchise. But please let me know how you feel about it in the comments. I admit, I normally hate doing negative videos like this. I always find them so emotionally draining. But this is something that I just couldn't stay silent on. Have a good one. Squill out.